Welcome to the Sustainable Supply Chains Pushing the NHS Forward to a Greener Future webinar today. I know that we are just at the end of the summer holidays, so I do appreciate everyone taking your time to come and spend with us today. Not as if that there's a lot of weather that you're missing outside in the UK this year. We do have a great lineup this afternoon where we've got Bryony Salter starting up first from Positive Planet, and then we have Louis Brown from EcoVadis, who's going to share his presentation as well. What I'm going to do is a little bit unprecedented, is I'm actually going to launch a poll. So if you know about sustainability partnerships, what we do at the beginning of the year is we always have an event where we talk about the agenda for the year ahead. So we bring in sustainability experts from within the NHS to talk about what their agenda is, what's happening with their green plan, what things that have gone well, what has been implemented, what has been taken in well into the trust, and things that they're still finding issues with or barriers with, and things that they really need to hone into that year. We will be doing the exact same things in January 24, so I hope that everyone can join us for that. But we do like to make sure that we are planning out the rest of the year with events that will be super relevant and very valuable to the NHS. So I actually have a poll which I'm going to launch now. Please let me know if people can see that and are able to vote in that poll in the chat if you're able to. Oh, I have a vote already. I'm going to leave this open throughout the entire event. Take a look at that when you can, and we'll be running these at the start of the rest of the events that we have coming up this year. So what I'm going to do now is just let Bryony, please, if you can introduce yourself, let us know a little bit more about what you do at Positive Planet. You are the head of impact and sustainability, so we're really excited to find out what exactly that entails. Please share with us what you have and take it away from there. I'm just going to go on mute if you want to share your screen.
Perfect, thank you. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Fab. So hi everyone. Thanks for everyone for sharing their time with us. I'm Bryony Salter, the head of impact and sustainability at Positive Planet. So if I can get these to move through, Positive Planet helps businesses to quantify their climate impact and transform intentions into action via carbon footprinting, strategy development, supply chain programs, training, and engagement. We're still a small team of now 20 ambitious and impact-driven people, and despite our size, provide support to some well-known big brands as well as smaller SMEs. Probably around 40% of the work we do at the moment is around public procurement, and within that, supporting NHS suppliers. So today I'm focusing on pushing towards a greener future as the NHS looks for opportunities to accelerate sustainable change within its supply chain. So I'll be discussing where we're at now and where suppliers need to get to if we're to achieve net zero. I'm conscious that there's a mix of NHS employees on the call today, but also existing and potential suppliers. So I'll be discussing from the perspective of the business, but hopefully this guidance will be valuable when engaging with suppliers and developing our support to enable that change as well. So first things first, what is the greener future we're all aiming towards? Without a sort of clear vision in mind, it's really difficult to develop and stick to a plan. So just for a minute, I want you to imagine what a greener, more sustainable future looks like. What do you hope that your world will look like in say 2050? So some of my hopes, whilst you're hopefully popping them in the chat, I hope that we'll have access to healthy, fresh, and affordable food year round that's locally produced, sustainable, has minimal chemicals. I hope that we'll have an affordable, clean energy and energy efficient homes. So things like the energy crisis we're currently going through will no longer be a worry. I hope that we'll have low cost, accessible, low carbon transportation, and everyone will be able to access that, and active travel will be enabled. I hope that we'll have clean air and waterways for everyone. So, regardless of where someone lives, they should be able to breathe clean air, drink clean water, have access to non polluted, biodiverse nature and waterways for leisure. I hope we'll have more predictable weather patterns and protection against severe weather events for our homes, our businesses, our infrastructure. And I hope that we'll have a more circular economy with very minimal waste produced, as organisations will hopefully have found more innovative, collaborative ways to reduce their waste, turn residual waste into assets. Supply chains will be more reliable, sustainable, and local where possible, and global logistics will be fully decarbonised. So that gives quite an in-depth view of where I hope we're going to go to in the future, and hopefully you've written some things in the chat, although I can't see those, but hopefully there's a clear tie-in with the NHS and healthcare, human health. A lot of this in sustainability links directly to human health, so there's a really clear correlation there. So now that we've got that vision in mind, how do we get there? So I've created a very simple stages of change model. So I've adapted this to the net zero journey. Sustainability and net zero can't happen overnight simply because we want them to. They do require a change in heart and mind, and therefore we do need to be thinking about sustainability as a large-scale change management program. So to date, the majority of businesses are in what we've termed the intent phase. So that is that they've considered the regulations and the climate challenges that we're facing, and that they've already started to prepare or are preparing for change. So that is that they're measuring their emissions and they're developing a carbon reduction plan. A survey done by the British Business Bank showed that 3/4 of businesses are yet to implement comprehensive decarbonisation strategies, so they're essentially stuck in this intent phase. So how do we achieve net zero and get to the greener future that we just imagined? Businesses do have a really important and influential role to play with this. Think about how many individuals, organizations, and policies businesses are able to influence through their employees, their customers, their supply chains, partners, competitors, industry bodies, for example. In my view, definitely achieving net zero is only possible through business change, and most have not yet embarked on that journey at all. So the model shows a continuous loop of change where updated regulations and opportunities will determine the next sort of intent and then impact phases. And as we know, carbon measurement and carbon reduction planning are done annually, certainly when it's for compliance and in the NHS context. So it may be that this circle or stages of change model becomes an annual loop for most businesses. So just very briefly looking at the intent phase, it's more to do with the sort of have-tos for business, the compliance in the NHS context. So nearly all suppliers should be now aware of the regulations and will be preparing or will already have prepared their measurements and their carbon reduction plans. But the net zero change model is circular, as I just mentioned, so the intent phase will regularly need to be revisited and realigned to the net zero timeline that the NHS has set out. As we know, regulations for NHS compliance get increasingly more challenging over time, but they're not difficult to achieve. Most organisations that we actually work with at Positive Planet, we're already measuring their Scope 3 emissions, and we aim to build on data quality, which we see as very much the sort of tricky bit, over time through supplier engagement. I know Louis from EcoVadis is covering that in a bit more detail in the next presentation, so I'm not going to go into any more detail on that. So the final thing that's perhaps missing for most organisations in the intent phase is having a structured strategy for achieving net zero. So whilst the carbon reduction plan that we're required to have provides a basic structure and those bigger targets, we are finding that clients are struggling to take their sort of action forward, so to do anything year on year. So what we're starting to do now is develop out net zero strategies with those longer term targets that they've set, broken down into bite-sized actions that are smart, so specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. And we identify resource requirements and prioritize actions by ease and cost versus benefit. Regular reviews are also essential to keep on top of deliverables and ensure that we don't go yet another full year with no change. So we really want to get over that being stuck in the intent phase. And the strategy documents will evolve over time as we work through the next stages of change and then loop back around annually. So we've now covered intent. We need to move on to impact, which is where we see businesses start to face challenges. So again, the British Business Bank conducted a survey of SMEs, and these were the common barriers that they were facing. To enable sustainability, we really need to be able to overcome these though. So that's where the enable stage comes in. So the situation will be slightly different across different organisations, but the principle is very much the same. We can't expect progress towards net zero without enabling sustainable choices. So for most organisations that we work with, this requires gaining board level and leadership buy-in through training and connecting the dots really between business growth and sustainability. It requires new business KPIs, for example, if sustainability is to ever be prioritised and capital and resource provided. It needs to involve the ambition to embed sustainability within company culture over time as well, and upskill all team members so that they can identify opportunities for sustainable change, cost savings and funding. So everyone's working towards this shared goal. It's also imperative to review and amend policies with a sustainability lens. So, for example, it's not possible for those with procurement responsibilities to choose more sustainable options if you've got a procurement policy in place that prevents them to do so. It prioritizes costs. So there really does need to be a sensible balance between functions, sustainability, and costs. And other policies that we support clients with include sustainable travel, annual leave, and home working policies to encourage, but not force, more sustainable behaviours at work and at home. They need to want to do this and get on board with the vision. So our training team at Positive Planet has supported businesses across most sectors, including NHS suppliers like medical equipment manufacturer Vernacare. We've delivered climate leadership courses as well as certified carbon literacy training to provide individuals with the knowledge and tools to make informed, sustainable decisions. And Vernacare have actually recently become what's called a carbon literate organisation. So that's certified through a third-party organisation by taking simple steps to show their commitment to sustainability. And they can now work towards becoming a silver and then a gold certified carbon literate organisation, which are ambitious yet really straightforward goals that any business can adopt and will really help to keep on track with net zero goals and make sure that we're enabling that change at every stage. So once you've got the strategy in place and you've taken those first steps to enable sustainability, you can start to take action. We do see a lot of businesses skipping sort of straight to this stage, and that's where things start to fall down and they come back and say, oh, we can't get anyone interested in this. It's proving really challenging. But once we've enabled and we've got that training, everyone should now be in a place where they can understand the sort of ultimate vision and their role in achieving it. So communicate the vision clearly, follow those smart targets, keep people engaged with that mission, and review that progress regularly and amend plans where needed. Also important to mention is identify how best your teams work to targets. So adjust messaging, adjust goal setting structures and potentially incentives if necessary, because it's really important to sort of note that everyone is motivated by different things and may learn in different ways. So really clear it's really important to adjust some of that. So you've got the ball rolling now, but need to keep up momentum. The only way really to do this is to embed sustainability across all areas of the organisation. So whilst they might be leading the charge, it's not really viable long term to rely on a green team or a sole sustainability manager to implement all sustainability changes. It requires sustainability to become an integral part of everybody's roles. So where people are making more sustainable choices almost unconsciously, it's becoming very much second nature to them. And embracing sustainability within company culture can also lead to enhanced branding, talent acquisition, and retention. And opportunities may start to arise to develop new and better products and services or to collaborate with others. You might also naturally find opportunities to improve efficiencies and reduce costs pop up as I say, it becomes second nature in everyone's role. So everyone's looking out for opportunities to do so. Once embedded within the business, we can then start to consider the longer term benefits of sustainability and opportunities to substantially grow your impact. So this is where we're thinking not only about your own emissions internally, but also that wider impact, or what we term the sort of climate shadow. So you'll still need to keep on top of actions and targets, but this is really the exciting part. Utilizing your networks to shout about the great things that you're doing, and you'll start to attract like-minded organizations and individuals and inspire those around you to make positive change. Creative solutions to decarbonize and opportunities for sustainable growth will also start to flow as you encourage internal ideas and promote those collaborative partnerships. So part of this stage is around communications and marketing, and whilst they're really key elements of any successful net zero journey, it's also an area where we see a lot of businesses start to fall down. So we know the problem, we have the solutions, but behaviour change at scale will only happen through that effective communication, and that is sometimes seen through marketing. And related to this, greenwashing and green hushing are two key terms that we're hearing a lot about at the moment. So in March, the European Commission proposed new rules to crack down on companies making unsubstantiated green claims or greenwashing. Here in the UK, we're seeing crackdowns from the advertising standards and financial conduct authorities. And whilst it's absolutely necessary that they're doing that and keeping on top of that, the fear then of saying anything wrong has led to what's called green hushing, where businesses just don't talk about any of their positive actions, which minimises their impact and inspires absolutely no one. So it's especially important for marketing professionals within organisations to receive that climate training. So whether that's carbon literacy training or other marketing specific training courses, and also seek out specific green claims resources and courses from the likes of the Advertising Standards Authority. Because when you do get that marketing and communications right, it can be extremely impactful and lead to significantly more positive change. So I've just popped up here some ideas of businesses that have done a great job of this already. So it's not businesses that are directly involved in sustainability, but we've got food businesses, we've got cleaning products, beauty and home care, outdoor clothing and equipment and packaging organizations, and they are really inspiring. They've embedded sustainability in their culture and within their marketing, their communications. They're inspiring other businesses to make change. They're inspiring their customers to make positive changes, and they're retaining those customers as well because they're embedding them in their process or the sort of journey towards net zero. So there's loads of benefits of getting to this stage and shouting about the positive impact. So let's just quickly recap. Most businesses are currently stuck in what we've termed the intent phase, having measured their emissions and developed carbon reduction plans. They now need to move on to the next phase by enabling change, taking action, embedding sustainability, and magnifying positive impact through effective communication and collaborations. Net zero is very much a long-term target, but if we want to achieve the greener future that we envisioned at the start, we need to move beyond that intent phase and towards impact as soon as possible. So that's all from me. Thanks very much for listening. Happy to take any questions at the end, I believe. And if you want to contact me afterwards, please feel free.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Bryony. I do appreciate you opening up with quite a big ambition at the start, what your hopes are for the future. It's kind of it's reaffirming, that we might be able to actually see that type of future in our lifetimes. And I think that your piece on the realistic goals, bite-sized actions, for example, make what is such a daunting task feel like at least we're getting somewhere and we're doing something. So I think that's great. Also appreciate you shouting out Vernica, a friend of Sustainability Partnerships, for sure. They've been on a few different things with us. Green hushing. Louis, are you familiar with this term? I feel like it's something maybe I should have known about before. I understand how people start to feel, do you know what, I'm not going to say anything, and just in case I get sort of outed, even though, which makes people more anxious about sharing even the good stories. So appreciate you bringing that point to us as well. I've got a few questions for you, which I will ask in the Q&A session after we've heard from Louis. I appreciate everyone joining in on the webinar chat as well. Donna from Forth Valley Trust, great to see you again, and everyone else who likes to join us on these. We've had 86% of our participants already fill in the poll. Don't know what you other 14% are doing, but if you do have some time during the next presentation, please take a look at that and share your opinion. Louis, I'm going to pass over to you now if you'd like to share your screen. Give us an introduction to yourself, EcoVadis, and what you're going to talk to us about today.
Sure. Thanks, Bryony, for your presentation. That was great. And Georgia, I'll give a quick introduction, then share my screen if that's okay with you. Awesome. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lee Brown, and as part of my role at EcoVadis, I've been speaking to quite a lot of NHS organisations recently. I've spoken with some very dedicated people doing some very progressive work within procurement, within sustainability, within supply chain, and I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you all today. So thank you for having me. Quick intro to me. My background is in sustainability and in software. And over the past few years, I've been trying to help large organizations to become more sustainable through the use of software tools. And for those of you who don't know EcoVadis, quick intro, EcoVadis is often considered to be the most trusted sustainable procurement platform to help organizations to really gain a reliable insight into the sustainability risks and opportunities of their supply chain, and then more importantly, to actually create impact and drive improvements of the sustainability performance of their suppliers. And in the past 12 months, EcoVadis has screened over 1.4 million companies, thoroughly assessed over 120,000 suppliers, and published over 25,000 detailed carbon scorecards. EcoVadis isn't sector specific, although it does have quite a strong presence in the healthcare sector. And EcoVadis runs a sustainable procurement initiative, sector initiative for the healthcare industry, which is called the Responsible Health Initiative. And its members include the likes of GlaxoSmithKline and AstraZeneca. So now I'll share my screen. And let's see if I can do this smoothly. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yeah, we can see that.
Excellent. So what I want to talk about today and what I'll be doing today is just a short presentation to summarize 16 years of EcoVadis's experiences in the market and of supply chain sustainability, to share with you what we might have seen to constitute of best practice in the market for companies like Unilever, like AstraZeneca and GlaxoSmithKline, and give you 5 potential considerations for scaling sustainability impact in your supply chain. But first of all, so what? Why is this important for the NHS to implement the best possible supply chain sustainability and sustainable procurement practices in the first place? Why does it matter? And I suspect the why of all of this is probably not lost on a lot of people in this room, but I think it's good to remind ourselves about it anyway, because I don't think we can talk about it enough. The opportunity to make a positive impact is so big, and it's quite exciting. So the NHS has the potential to influence sustainability improvements in over 80,000 different companies to reduce the risk of people working as modern slaves in these businesses, to improve their well-being, to promote equity, to promote diversity, to promote inclusion. And when we're specifically talking about carbon, the NHS has the opportunity to reduce a supply chain carbon footprint larger than Afghanistan's. Turning this carbon footprint into net zero would quite literally make a material difference in limiting the impacts of climate change. It would quite probably help to reduce extreme weather events, and could quite possibly play a part in enabling food security for our children. And finally, the NHS has the opportunity to be even more responsible with a procurement budget which is larger than the gross domestic product of Senegal and dozens of other countries. So it's quite exciting. And so what are the five, and the subject of this presentation, what are the five key considerations for NHS organisations to potentially consider looking at to scale impact in the supply chain? And many of you may already be doing elements of this or all of this. Now, the first consideration is to verify supply chain sustainability data to help ensure that it is reliable. Because one thing we know is that when you're basing your net zero and modern slavery strategies on the information that suppliers are providing to you, it's quite important to be able to trust that information. And with a supply chain carbon footprint of over 18 million tons, would you be entirely comfortable with your most carbon intensive suppliers potentially marking their own carbon homework? And by the same token, would you want, let's say, your top 1,000 suppliers who are most at risk, who might be most at risk of having modern slavery in their supply chains, to have the data that they provide to you go unchallenged? And in our experience, unless suppliers are required to submit evidence, which is then reviewed by experts, then quite often they might let on that they're doing a lot more than they actually are. In other words, more likely to greenwash, which makes it harder for you to manage risk and create positive impact, which is what it's all about. So that's the first consideration. And the second consideration is, can you give your suppliers access to a mutualized platform to reduce survey fatigue? And what I mean by a mutualized platform is essentially just the option to give suppliers the option to share their responses or to share the information that they might provide to you to other organizations, and try and create this collaborative platform. Because survey fatigue is a well-known and much maligned phenomenon. The ideal scenario is to give suppliers the option to share their responses with other interested parties, or in other words, a mutualized platform to avoid duplication of effort. And not only would this significantly increase your supplier response rates and your engagement with them, but it also adds significant value to the supplier, reduce their fatigue, and help them to focus on impact and actually improving the things that can help them to improve their sustainability performance, which is the good stuff. So that's the second consideration. Third consideration, benchmarking versus industry standards. And this one's quite interesting because you can compare the sustainability performance of your suppliers against each other, but it's quite important to have industry context and also country context when you are sort of analyzing or looking to drive impact within your supply chain. Because, for example, if you're assessing the modern slavery management system of supplier A and supplier B, and if one is a management consultancy, a large management consultancy, let's say based in the UK, and the other is a small fabric manufacturer in the East, potentially in Bangladesh or somewhere else, they will be operating in very different contexts. And this context is super important because it will help to enhance your understanding of the risks and opportunities of each supplier, and then help you to also drive more impact with them. So that having good benchmarking is quite important and can be quite impactful in our experience. The fourth is what it's all about, really. It's about corrective action. It's about impact. So once you have, hopefully, build a reliable picture of the current state of sustainability in your supply chain, how do you engage your suppliers to improve the future state? For example, how can we help some of these 80,000 suppliers to reduce their carbon emissions and consequently your scope 3 emissions? Could you ask, and a lot of you probably are already asking, your most immature suppliers to start reporting on scope 1 and 2 emissions? Could you ask your more mature suppliers to start reporting on carbon footprint data, which I believe will be mandated by 2028 by the NHS already? But can you potentially ask your more mature suppliers to do that already? And in an ideal world, could you ask all of them to switch to renewable electricity? And then critically, can you then drive, track, and monitor all of this in an efficient and scalable way? Because that can be quite tricky, even with the best intentions. And the fifth and final consideration is education for suppliers on their maturity journey. And I know Bryony touched on this in her presentation, because can you give them access to proper learning courses and give them proper guidance so that they're able to change things, so that they're able to improve their carbon maturity, so that they're able to improve their actions, their policies, their results that they're achieving when it comes to their modern slavery management system? And not only will this help you to drive impact with your suppliers, but it also, will also help you to improve your relationship with suppliers too. So we see that as a really key way of being able to drive impact within the supply chain. So that rounds up the 5 considerations that we sort of see constitutes of best practice within the market and within supply chain sustainability in general. And to summarize quickly, the first is verification of supply chain sustainability data. The second is giving suppliers the ability to really share information with other interested parties and reduce survey fatigue, help them to focus on impact. The third is to understand industry context for benchmarking purposes. And the fourth is to, can you drive and monitor impact and corrective actions with suppliers? For example, can you switch to renewable electricity? Can you start reporting your carbon emissions? Can you implement a modern slavery policy? All of these different things. Can you drive and track that action in a scalable and efficient manner? And then the fifth is education for suppliers on their sustainability maturity journey. And it might sound like quite a lot with the usual challenges around time, around budget, but with the opportunity to impact more than 80,000 suppliers, the opportunity to reduce a supply chain carbon footprint larger than Afghanistan's, and the opportunity to be even more responsible with a procurement budget larger than the total GDP of Senegal, it's certainly worth your best shot. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Amazing. Thanks, Louis. I really, really appreciate that. I think that I know that we do talk about this quite often, and it was something that was key to us launching sustainability partnerships, to be that conduit between procurement managers who we know are time poor, have a lot of things on their plate, and have had sustainability now added as an overarching thread to their operations and their actions. And for us to be here showcasing things like EcoVadis on our presentations and like what the work Positive Planet are doing. I think that the piece around marking your own homework is really important, because I feel like there may be incumbents on procurement platforms that are a little bit resting on their laurels because they've had such long relationships with the NHS, where actually what we are here to do is to make sure that we're democratizing that supply chain and disrupting it a little bit as well, making sure that actually sustainable alternatives, far, far more sustainable alternatives, are getting a seat at that table. So that democratization of the supply chain and looking at, like you said, around the fatigue of having to fill so much stuff in, actually crowdsourcing and collaborating on that process can make things so much more refined and efficient for everyone on both sides. So yeah, really appreciate that. I've not had any questions come in on the Q&A. I do have some, which I'm going to just jump in with, and then we'll see if anyone has any other questions on the Q&A. I know that there are some points coming in where people are just mentioning things on the chat, and I really appreciate it. And everyone can obviously feel free to just keep on chatting amongst yourselves. The first big one, I think, for both of you guys, I wanted to bring up, it's quite broad. I don't know how long either of you have been working in healthcare and with the NHS, but I wanted to know sort of how you guys feel about the change of mindset, because we've only been running SP for 2-3 years now, and we have seen such a massive change in that time. Yes, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through a lot of things, we've gone through cost of living crises, but we have seen sustainability absolutely unwaveringly be at the top of a lot of people's agendas, and we've seen interest and, you know, our audience and our community has grown substantially in that time. Do you want to start off, Louis, maybe, and let us know, what changes have you seen, and how far do you think that we've come in the time that you've been working in sustainability?
Just in generally, Georgia, in general.
In general, but then if you have any context for healthcare, the NHS as well.
It's an interesting one, really, because sometimes it can feel like the sustainability can gain and gather a lot of momentum after, for example, the COP in Glasgow. And then sometimes it can feel like it can get pushed down the agenda. And as soon as, for example, the cost of living crisis hits, or businesses are more concerned about the bottom line, sometimes it can get pushed down the agenda. So that's what I've kind of seen happen over the last few years, is a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of really good stuff, a lot of great action, potentially just the topic of sustainability reaching more people than it ever has done before. But then at the same time, the priority of sustainability, I've seen that sometimes slip down the agenda because of usual challenges around around budgets, especially with the cost of living crisis playing a part in that, and the sort of wider macroeconomic situation. So that would be sort of my summary. But I think there is a huge cause for optimism, because I feel like there's more people engaged and who understand and want to improve the situation, than there ever has been before. And that's a huge cause for optimism. And there are lots of great people doing lots of great things. So that would be my overall summary, Georgia.
Thanks, Louis. And Bryony, you were super optimistic at the start of your presentation. It was actually quite inspiring. A lot of the time, it's just sort of stat after stat of doom and gloom. So I appreciate you opening up with something a little bit more optimistic. That must be fueled by something. Let us know what you've seen in terms of progress.
Yeah. Well, myself, I've worked in sustainability for just over 8 years, and at the start of that journey, it was I was delivering sustainability consulting to small businesses, and it was really, really difficult, really challenging to get anyone on board with change. Often you'd be talking to one single person that had been handed this piece of work to do, and there was no buy-in at all across the organisation. It was just really, really challenging to get anyone on board with it, and there has been a huge change over the last few years where now, I mean, certainly for Positive Planet, we're growing so fast because businesses are coming to us now. Whilst I was the one chasing businesses to try to encourage them on the sustainability journey, now they're coming to us, and that's such a huge, huge change. But I do think we have the NHS to thank for, specifically within the healthcare sector. Obviously, they're pushing that agenda, and encouraging businesses to get on board with this quite rapidly. So the NHS, we do have a lot to thank for that. The other thing as well is that we now have some really inspiring, ambitious businesses to learn from. So some of the ones that I shared in my presentation, for example, we're seeing amazing things coming from those businesses, and opportunities that they're now able to access. So, they're improving their branding, they're improving their products, their services, they're collaborating with others, they're getting more customers in because they believe in that vision and that brand. So there are so many benefits to that. And because businesses are now seeing others do that and successfully do that and excel in it, I think that's pushing a lot of that agenda forwards as well.
Yeah, I think it's when you see pressure from the top, i.e. this sustainability is now a bullet point on every board minutes, right? And you see the pressure from the bottom, the groundswell of people who need to see the change. It becomes a snowball effect. And I think that that's what you guys have started to witness. It's what we've seen at sustainability partnerships, and just the positivity around it as well, as opposed to this is something that we have to do and we're getting pressured into it. People are starting to actually see the positive outcomes from the long-term effects of people being concerned with sustainability, and when it comes to healthcare, that also includes things like the health effects of people realizing that we will become more healthy if we become more sustainable. Louis, you don't have to raise your hand, you can just jump in.
Thanks, Georgia.
I'm not the dictator of this session, you just jump in with what you have to say.
I just wanted to share a couple of positive developments from our impact reports over the past year, because we've seen the number of suppliers on our platform who have switched to renewable electricity more than double within a year, which is an example of how action is really accelerating. We've seen the amount of spend that we see go through the EcoVadis platform go from 2.8 trillion to 4.3 trillion, I believe, over the past 12 months. So that's a huge increase. So there are some really, really exciting things happening, and sometimes it can feel like, with the narrative that you might see sometimes it can feel like we might be, taking one step back, but really, when you look at the full picture, I think it's one that's just really encouraging. And ultimately, I think businesses and people are doing more than they ever have done before, and it's something to certainly celebrate and something to feel really positive about and to keep driving, in my opinion.
Yeah. And from what you guys do, it's really about data as well, right? We can't really put the narrative together without data from platforms like EcoVadis to tell us the changes is a bigger picture. So we do have a question on how do you verify what third-party auditing is available to do this? Can you field that one at all for us, Louis?
Sure. So there are a number of organizations who can verify sustainability data. EcoVadis, the company that I work for, are one of those. And essentially how it tends to work is, for example, if let's talk about labor and human rights. So, for example, can we verify that they have, first of all, a modern slavery policy? So they will, a company or a supplier will submit evidence to show that they have a policy in place. And then it's up to the analyst and the verification team to decide, okay, so how good is that policy? Is it real? And then that's the way that that's the way that you can do that. What are the actions that they might be taking in that area? Are they training employees? Do they have any measures with regards to fair wage implementation, different pay structures? What are they actually doing? Have they got any training on that? And they then a supplier would then submit evidence to show that they are completing this training, that they do have these measures in place, for example. And then what about results? Are they reporting any of this? Have they got any of this in any reports? Do they have any KPIs? And again, a company would be required to submit evidence there. So that's kind of how the verification works. It's a case of a company or a supplier submitting documents and then that being looked at by analysts and being essentially judged on, is this real? Does this document make sense? Sometimes can we cross-check that against other databases? For example, with the Science-Based Targets Initiative, if a company says they've committed to science-based targets, can we cross-reference that against the Science-Based Targets database? These sort of things. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it was Douglas who'd asked it, so hopefully he will let you know if that's answered his question. Obviously, we'll, as always, have our full event write-up, all of our speakers' contact details on the Sustainability Partnerships website post-event. Bryony, here's one that I think from Timothy might be more relevant to you, because you were talking about engagement as well. So how do we involve, engage and educate the customers of the NHS, i.e. the patients, the carers, and appreciating the importance of sustainability within healthcare services? And this is something that we speak about quite a lot. One of them, interestingly, is things like nutrition. We have, our nutrition experts within the NHS feel that there may be pushback for using more sustainable means, less animal protein based meals, for example, because they're concerned that actually there's no engagement from the patient side and patient comes first. So I wonder if you can help Timothy with his question around not just educating the staff within the NHS, but really how the NHS it has to educate its patients to say we are trying to do the best for you and for ourselves and for our planet.
Yeah, I think again, it does come back to communications. If we improve on, well, firstly, if we embed sustainability within the NHS to the extent where it just becomes second nature in everything that everyone is doing, regardless of their roles, that will start to filter down into, the actions that we're taking, some of the communications patients might see across hospitals, healthcare facilities, websites, everywhere. So we'll start to almost subconsciously receive that messaging as well. And I do think communication is a really, really key part of that. And communicating the benefits of making those more sustainable choices as well. So maybe not focusing purely on this is the most sustainable and this has less carbon emissions, but actually really focusing on the benefits to the patients, to other people that are working with the NHS. Like, for example, businesses, when we're thinking about embedding sustainability, but actually that could lead to business growth. It could lead to higher retention of customers and better supply chain. We could potentially see very similar with patients as well. So focus on the benefits to them as an individual, those health benefits. Actually, is it going to be easier for them? Is it going to taste better? Is it going to, all those different things? What can we focus on that's not necessarily just those sustainability elements? So relate it very much back to the individual and their circumstances and what they're going to engage with best. I think focusing purely on sustainability is the wrong way to go about it. We need to focus on them themselves and what's going to be relevant to them.
Yeah, I think that reintroducing, re-ingraining the concept and the narrative of it being our NHS, right? We all pay into it. It should be beneficial to all of us, and we should understand what money's being spent on and why, and understand that it's for the greater good, it's for everyone's benefit. I saw something on LinkedIn. Claire Jones, who's the Energy and Sustainable Compliance Officer at Royal Devon, she has been on one at the Healthcare Trust in Devon. She's been on one of our events before, and she posted something. It was a really, really simple poster. And it just said to just turn off your engines so that our patients can breathe clean air. And although there will be air quality sensors around their practices and around the hospitals, and that's something that's kind of insular information for the hospitals to say, what's the air quality around here? How are we improving that? Just a simple poster or a simple sign or something that's saying to people, the patients and the carers, we are monitoring our air quality. We need you to turn off your engines because it's better for you if you do. It's just not so that we can hit our quota as the NHS for our 2040 goals, 2045 ambitions. It's so that you guys actually are healthier. and we're doing it in a sustainable way. So we don't have any other questions come up, unless there's any others. Do you guys have any questions for each other? Bryony and Louis, feel free to ask each other anything. I know that you've already been introduced, so you might have had conversations before.
I don't have any questions right now, but I might be able to think of some soon. But what I was going to do is also share a couple of extra statistics around the responsible health initiative that we've run and some of the interesting things that we've seen happen within the healthcare supply chain. I could share a couple of stats if that's interesting, Georgia.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is that 73% of suppliers in the responsible health initiative supply chain, 73% of those suppliers have improved since their first assessment, because unfortunately not every supplier improves, but 73% of them have improved their score since their first assessment. 41% of them report on greenhouse gases and energy consumption, which is higher than the industry average, which is interesting. It's 8% higher than the industry average that we see. And of those reporting specifically on carbon emissions, that is significantly above the average as well. So there's just a couple of interesting insights to the healthcare supply chain that we have an oversight into and some of the things that are happening there.
We do have a question now from Rich, actually, which I think might be for you if you have any info on health tech companies specifically. And I believe he's probably speaking about medical devices, probably manufacturing, because they're more carbon intensive than, say, a health tech piece of software. So he's asking, who is the Patagonia of the sector?
I'm going to mute myself. Yes, had to move the mouse across the screen. Who's the Patagonia? Good question. Well, we know that so GlaxoSmithKline are certainly trying to implement best practice and have been tried to take an advanced position on a lot of these issues for quite some time. That's one thing we know. We developed some of our early sort of product add-ons in alignment with and features in alignment with GlaxoSmithKline many years ago. So they're super engaged. Another is AstraZeneca. So they are both, and they're both, of course, British companies, I believe. And we see them to be trying to implement best practices in the industry, and they're both leading partners in the Responsible Health Initiative, which has some other members as well. So I hope that answers your question. I mean, I don't know what they do in loads and loads and loads of detail, but I do know of what they're of an overview of what they do. But anyway, hope that answers your question.
So no one quite given up the company to the earth yet, but we don't know if
yeah, not quite that level yet.
And then finally, there is an anonymous attendee, Bryony, who I don't think has done that on purpose. I don't think they're trying to remain anonymous, but they're asking ahead of the new regulations what advice you would give to businesses that are starting out towards their journey. What are some of the first steps? You talked about this, those bite-sized actions, that prioritization piece. What's your sort of gems of advice?
They just get started. That's the trickiest bit, is to just get the ball rolling, get started on your journey. But I mean, if it's for compliance for NHS, obviously you'll need to start measuring your footprint. But what we advise new organisations that are starting on this NHS compliance journey is to measure as much as they possibly can. Obviously, you only have to measure 5 categories of scope 3, but we actually encourage them to do as many as possible. So in the first year, we can measure pretty much mostly everything within scope 1, 2, and all of scope 3. The data quality might not be the best in year 1, but it gives you a really good baseline, and then that data quality we can build on over time. So we structure that development in a way that makes sense for the organisation. So engage with them, understand their needs, understand who's involved with it and how much time they have to give to some of this. understand their relationship with their suppliers and how much information they're going to be able to get from them, and then structure their supply chain program. So I think just getting started, doing what you need to do, but being ambitious. And then we can build on things over time. You don't have to be perfect. So back to another point on the marketing, you don't have to be perfect, but just be transparent about what you're doing. Just get started, and then we'll start to see that sort of snowball effect and that positive impact really take hold.
Great. So I do have to quickly go over some things that we have upcoming. We have the World Green Building Week coming up in September. So that's a global week of just green buildings in general. We are going to have our event on the 13th of September. We then in October are going to have a new event, the Future of Sustainability in the NHS Reuse, Repurpose Revolution. And given that circular economy has come up as 24% of you guys on this event interested in that. I'm glad that we've put that in there. If you are looking for the NHS Sustainability Awards, which are normally in October, that has now been moved to February, but more information on getting involved with those awards and nominating your trust or business will be coming up soon. Then in November, we've got Field to Fork, Sustainability and Nutrition. So that's one of my favourite things to talk about. Fresh food, closed loops, close food production, those types of things are getting really important, and it will be more important in the future. And yeah, sorry, the Sustainability Awards are going to be 31st of January. So we will be coming up with more information on how to get involved with them. And also we will always be having the Sustainability Agenda event that we always have to kick off the start of the year. So I want to say a massive thank you to both Bryony and Louis today for coming and talking about what you guys are up to. I think it's been a really positive event, and I appreciate everyone who's got involved with conversations, with questions, with just being here on the chat and giving up what may be the last of your summer holidays, an hour of the last of your summer holidays. Really appreciate everyone being with us. Louis, you raised your hand again. Just shout.
I just wanted to also say thank you very much, and just to close on two things, two inspiring things that people that I'm talking to within the NHS are doing. So there's a senior lady who's a chief procurement officer who is taking a really leading position on talking about equity, diversity, inclusion. She's going to probably be speaking at one of our events over the next 6 months. So we'll keep you all in the loop with that. That's one thing. And there's another gentleman who I spoke to who's a sustainability and social value manager, and he essentially built a learning course for a lot of his suppliers. He built, I think it was a climate change learning course for his suppliers, and it took him several months. But they're just two examples of some of the really great work that I've seen people within the NHS do, and two exciting things to potentially close my involvement of the meeting. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, please email me. I know the guys have got my email. But yeah, that's just the closing comments for me. And thank you to Bryony as well, and you, Georgia.
Yeah, we'll share your contact details, and if you give us the links to other events that you're running with these trailblazers in the NHS, please we'll share them with everyone on our blog as well when we get the write-up of this event. Bryony, did you have any closing statements?
Nothing in particular that I wanted to mention. I did just share on the Q&A about what's the Patagonia of healthcare. I did just share that there is an organisation that I've worked with previously, not a current Positive Planet client, but Woolcool, who work within pharma industry, but healthcare, and provide innovative, sustainable wool products to keep things cool. And they do a great job of that marketing comms piece, that engagement with their customers. So do have a look at them, have a look at their website and how they communicate with everyone that they work with. They're a really great case study for some of that. So yeah, have a look at that. But thank you very much for having me on today's call. I do hope it's been valuable to some people. And if you do want to get involved with Positive Planet and the great things we're doing, just feel free to get in touch with me or anyone else that's been posted in the chat from Positive Planet.
Thanks, Bryony. I did see them as a example in your presentation with the little cat box and stuff. It was really cute. Great. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming on today. We have overrun by a couple of minutes, but that's what we normally do. So please come back and you can rewatch on our YouTube channel. This will be going out as a video across all of our social media. Looking forward to seeing everyone at Green Building Week next month. So have a great day and see you then.